Hey Stampers, Kim from stampingimperfection.com. I'm so happy you're here to join me today. I have a video to share from 7 Kids Craft Store, and I'm sharing their August release. Before I forget, please make sure you subscribe to my channel and give this video a like, and make sure you click that bell so you get notifications every time I upload a new video. So I created a couple of videos already this month sharing the Pizzeria Parlor and the Pizzeria Kids stamp sets from the August release. These 4 stamp sets are 7 Kids Craft Store's exclusive August release, and I've already done a couple cards with those Pizzeria Kids and the Pizzeria Parlor sets, and you can see they're very well loved. I've been playing with them a lot. So now I've pulled out the Faery sets. There are 2 just darling Faery sets, and I pulled out, I had there are the birthday fairies there, and then the back to fairy school, and you can see I didn't even open that birthday fairies yet. That is next on my list because I created 4 cards with the back to fairy school, and this is the very first September in my entire life practically that I will not be going back to school in September. Because I just recently retired. So I am feeling a little nostalgic, and I really love this Back to Fairy School stamp set. And you can see I've played with all but 2 of the little images so far, and I still have 1 little sentiment to play with, so I'm not done with this yet either. I love these. Now, one of the things about these stamp sets is they are outline stamps, so you do need to do a bit of coloring. And if coloring images isn't your favorite thing, there are some easy ways to do it, or quick ways. You don't have to be a colorist to enjoy this. You can use your colored pencils, you can use your blender pen with your ink pads, you can use your alcohol markers. And on these little fairy cards, I've been using my Altenew artist markers, which are alcohol markers that come in sets of 12 that have coordinated colors, so I don't have to decide what colors to layer together. There are 60 markers altogether, and I love them. The price point is excellent. They are refillable. I did a video on just this little fairy who I adore, where I spent a lot of time showing you how I use those Altenew markers to very quickly and with as little stress as possible color in those little fairy images. So I'm not going to in this video spend a ton of time, or any time really, showing you how I color anything in, with the exception of that little pile of dirt underneath that middle card with the caterpillar, or the bookworm, and the pile of books. I will show you how I did that because that's kind of a cool technique. But with the rest of them, I'm just going to show you how I created the cards and what techniques I used on the cards. So I've created these 2 cards are basically the same layout really. If I created a card sketch, it would look the same for these 2 cards. But I've used a couple different techniques on them. And this one I did, I masked that circle so I could do just ink blend that background and have mostly white space on my card. And I did not mask the little girl. I stamped her over the top of my ink blending, and you can see that made her a little bit darker, like all the coloring a little bit darker, a little bit more muted, and I kind of like the effect. And then I spritzed those cards with my shimmer mist, and they're very sparkly, which is very hard to see in photos or on camera. And I'm always disappointed that you can't see that better because it's such a pretty thing to do. So don't forget those things in your stash. So I started with the little rainbow one. So I'm using this adorable little fairy who's holding a book, and she's got all the flowers in her hair. This is just such a sweet image. And when I stamped it the second time, my paper moved a little bit, so I'm just flipping that paper over because I sort of got a double image, and I'm stamping this one twice, being more careful about the paper being in the corner. And then I'm just going to pull her out, and I'm going to go ahead and color her with my Altenew markers. And I'm going to start with her face, and there are 4 brown shades of brown in one of the sets. I think it's set D, and I'm choosing 3 of those, and I just do the darkest one first around the edges where I think the darkest shades will be. Then I take the medium one, I go right over that darker color and make it a little bit wider. I just widen out my coloring, and then I take the lightest color I'm using and I go over the medium color, and that helps them blend. When you go over the color you just did, that helps the colors blend together so you get a nice smooth blend, and then I just fill the rest in. That's how I'm going to do all the coloring. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up the coloring, and the wings I did with the dots just like I did on that little fairy holding the pencil in my last video, so you'll definitely want to check that out. It makes them look like they're sparkling. So I'm using a piece of this 3M Post-it removable tape. I love this stuff, and I'm using 3 Katherine Pooler inks because Kelly has, in the 7 Kids Craft Store, Katherine Pooler just came out with mini ink pads for her Paradise Found spa collection, and I'm using 3 inks from that set here. So I'm using the Sauna was the yellow, and these went on really heavy because I just re-inked my pads, and I'm okay with that. I'm using the Daydream, and I use the Peppermint Scrub. And you can see that I'm getting a little bit of green between the Sauna and the Daydream, and I got a little bit of orange between the Peppermint Scrub and the Sauna. I love these 3 colors. Love, love, love. And I love that Katherine Pooler just came out with the mini ink pads in these. So Kelly has those in the 7 Kids Craft Store today, so definitely check those out. This is just some metallic shimmer dusk spray I got from Altenew. I'm trying to remember to use these things. I fussy cut out the girl after I did that splattering, and then I'm adding some Wink of Stella to the top. And this image is all dry, and these are alcohol inks, and that is Altenew's permanent black ink, so it's not going to run when I use that. I'm going to give that a minute to dry while I stamp my sentiment. And I love this little sentiment that says sparkle wherever you go, so I've been using that on most of these cards. I just love it. I think it's a beautiful little sentiment. It's like bring your own sunshine, sparkle wherever you go. And I'm going to stamp that again in that permanent black ink. Whatever black ink you have that you love, use that black ink. But if you're using alcohol markers, it needs to be the permanent black. It needs to be a pigment ink, not a dye ink. So Katherine Pooler inks are dye inks, except her Midnight Black. But if you use her Midnight Black, that is an ink that stays wet for a while. You need to heat set it before you color with your alcohol markers, because it could smear a little bit. I love her black ink. Love, love, love. I don't have the same issue with the smearing with the Altenew permanent ink, so I pulled that out, and this is a brand new ink pad, so I'm playing with it. So I just used a little foam tape and popped her up, and that card is done. I could add more stuff, but I'm not going to. So these papers are Katherine Pooler's Flutters and Blooms papers. Those are her pattern papers. I love Katherine Pooler's pattern papers. They're like heavy cardstock, and they are single-sided, and they have a little bit of a shine to them, which I quite like. Kelly has that set of Katherine Pooler papers in her store, so you definitely want to check that out. They're gorgeous. That's my all-time favorite Katherine Pooler set of papers. So I pulled out the little bookworm and little stack of books, and I'm just putting them side by side, and you can see I'm conditioning my stamp with my Pentel polymer eraser there. I just rub it over a couple times just to get good impressions. And I always ink my stamps twice when I'm doing these outline images. Again, that's the Altenew permanent black ink. I've pulled out the greens, so I'm going to use some greens and yellow on this little guy. And again, starting with the dark one, doing the medium, blending over the dark one, and then doing the light and blending over that. So I've pulled in a bunch of other colors, yellows and blues and reds. And now to create that little pile of dirt, I'm taking those 4 browns, and I started with the lightest color. I'm just making a bunch of dots, leaving lots of white spaces between the dots. Then I take the second darkest, and I start just filling in, and I overlap the dots. Then I do the next darkest, and this is the darkest one of all, and I just fill it in, and I make sure that, it's covering the space that I want covered. And a lot of times I'll take the lightest color again and then go back over it. And I love the texture I get. I do a lot of like paths this way, or ground covering this way, because I like it. Sand, I do this a lot with some big swatches of like colors. So now I'm just trying to pick one of these gorgeous papers, and I'm going to pick that green polka dot one because I love polka dots. I liked the yellow stripe, but I thought it was a little too light with the colors I'd use, and I love that plaid so much. I'm saving that for I don't know what, but something. So I'm going to go with that green. And I just love the polka dot. So I'm just going to trim this down to 4 1/4, because my card bases are all 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So I just trim that down. Those are 6 by 6 papers. And then I'm just going to trim off the excess from the bottom there. And I want to cover up that line. So I'm going to use my sentiment to do that. So I'm going to take one of the other sentiments, a little pixie dust for your school day. I love it. And I'm going to actually do this. I'm going to turn my little mini Misty, because I'm going to do this in the middle of this paper. And I'm sorry, I'm a little out of the camera range here, but I'm doing that along the bottom, and I want there to be a lot of white on the left and a lot of white on the right, because I'm going to trim this down, and I'm going to put it on and then trim off the edges. So again, using that Altenew black permanent black ink, and I'm trying to do this lightly and not push down too hard, because with those little tiny sentiments, and I'm just trimming 1/4 of an inch off that paper, by the way. Those little squares allow you to measure that. With those little sentiments, though, that's very fine detail, so I don't want to push my stamp down and get a blob of ink on one of the letters. So I tend to stamp it 2 or 3 times very lightly so that I can see every letter. I contemplating putting a little pixie in there, but then I just pulled out my shimmer mist, and you can't see this at all unless you're in person. But I'm going to spritz this. I have a little box I use to spritz, and I'm just holding that shimmer mist way up high, and you can see I get some big spots, but I get a lot of fine mist, which you can not really see, but it's so pretty when you hold that. And I went right over that Katherine Pooler pattern paper, and it dried beautifully. I'm adding some more because I like it so much. I often forget to use these shimmer mists. I don't know why. So that completed my second card. For my third card, I have these mask things. I forget I think they're called Simple Blends. They're from Brutus Monroe. You could basically take a piece of cardstock that's cut the same size as your card front. This is 5 1/2 by 4 1/4, and you could cut a big circle out of it with your die cutting machine. I just bought the mask because I use this so much. I just went ahead and bought this. So I'm taking some of that Daydream ink with a blender pen, and I'm blending it heavier around the outside. I'm going to put a little tiny bit in the center because I wasn't sure where the girl would land, and I do want it to be all around her. So I try to keep it light in the center. And if I wasn't being lazy about this, I would have stamped that little fairy, created a mask, put the mask over, and then blended around her using this circle. So, that's the right way to do it. That's not how I'm doing it, because I wanted to make this quicker. So I'm going to stamp her in that Altenew permanent black ink. That's the black ink I chose to use today. And, you could use your Memento if you're using alcohol markers, or you could use the Katherine Pooler, but you do want to give that a little bit of time to dry. A lot of times I don't, and I do okay with it, but it's better to heat set that one. But that is a permanent ink, and it will work with your alcohol markers. You just have to let it dry. So I've got her stamped. Now I'm going to go ahead and color her, and I'm going to use green for her hair. I'm going to use the same browns because the Altenew inks only have 4 browns. And if you want darker skin tones, use the darkest color and pick 2 other shades. On these little images, I really only use 2 or 3 different shades of the colors. If you want lighter skin tones, use more of the lighter. So I'm going to add that a little bit of, it's a little pixie dust for your school day, and put it right across the image. So I have a nice single layer card here. I love single layer cards. I love starting with a plain white sheet of paper and then just doing some techniques, doing some coloring, and all of a sudden you have this beautiful image, and it was just a plain white sheet of paper when you started. It's my favorite thing to do. I love it. And I have been enjoying challenging myself to create single layer cards, and to create single layer cards that actually look like they have multiple layers. So again, I'm going to stamp this multiple times very lightly. I'm not like pushing very hard at all. And I just have that one word that's not stamping well. And if that happens to you, just put a little piece of copy paper or a post-it note underneath your image and restamp it, because that part of the stamp might just be a little bit lower. I learned that from Altenew, actually, that if one part of the stamp isn't inking up the way you'd like, and there's that shimmer mist again, and you can see the sparkle there, that is so pretty. But the stamps during the manufacturing process always don't come out flat, so just put something under the part that's not inking up the way you'd like it to. So here are my cards one more time, and I don't know why I'm doing this in slow motion, but I love these cards. They're just there's a lot of white space, a lot of clean and simple. I really enjoyed making them, and I like the new coloring technique that I'm doing with just the 3 inks, and doing the darker, then going over that with the medium, then going over the medium with the light and filling in the rest with the light, is working out really well for me. It's not something I'm going to win coloring contests with, but when I give this to someone, they're going to see light and dark spots, they're going to see highlights and shadows, and that's what I care about. That's all I care about. Thank you so much for watching today. Please make sure you give this video a like and share it with your friends on social media. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and click the bell. All the links for the 7 Kids store will be below, so I'll have the links for these stamp sets and that Katherine Pooler paper and those Katherine Pooler mini ink pads. Get those while she has them. Those are going to go fast. You'll also find all the social media links for the 7 Kids craft store below. You want to make sure you follow them on Instagram and Facebook. There's a special Facebook group for customers where you can share your own creations and interact with the design teams. So I'm very happy to share these with you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed them. I hope this inspired you to create some little fairies for back to school. So thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day.